Broadcast Center. In the past few weeks, I've had the remarkable pleasure of myself just finding, I think, one of the more interesting bloggers / Twitter accounts that I've found in recent history. I say it's interesting because one of the one of the features of a blogger or a writer or someone who's active on social media is to, as I always say, answer questions that I didn't even know I had to ask. When someone writes and it's well written, and at the same time it provides cogent analysis backed up by fact, we must treasure and encourage those type of, if you will, those type of interactions. Because despite what Springsteen said about how many stations there's nothing on, if one works hard enough, one will find a wealth, a treasure trove of folks and resources across the independent media biosphere, if you will, in Rhode Island. I'm always quick to point out people like Steve Alquist and Tony Jones and Motif Magazine, and of course, the mothership here, Go Local Proud. You don't have to settle anymore for, quite frankly, the conventional, corporate-driven, factory-produced media, which does nothing more than regurgitate, quite frankly, other people's media. Independent thought is we worship here at the Coalition. So it is a great pleasure for the first time, and hopefully not the last, that I introduce to you to Alex Nunes. Alex teaches at a variety of area colleges. He's involved in journalism and communications, but he also blogs and also communicates via, I think, one of the funniest but also more cogent Twitter feeds right here in Rhode Island right now. Alex, welcome to the Coalition.
Hi, thanks for having me, Pat.
So I stumbled across you because of the timeliness of your reporting and analysis of both defense issues and, in an interesting twist of fate, the recently announced subsidies of a defense facility right here in Rhode Island. But give us a little bit about your background. I know you teach. How did you come to this space right now where you've decided to write on your own?
Okay, so like my professional background and everything?
Yep.
Yeah, so I started in journalism in radio at the Providence NPR station, Rhode Island Public Radio, as an intern when I was in college. I graduated in 2006, so about 12 years ago. And then after that, I worked in a couple of different places, either in newspapers or in radio, doing reporting. And then the last couple of years, I've been working freelance and teaching journalism and communications at the college level. And within the last year, I've been reporting a lot on corporate accountability, government accountability, as it specifically relates to the defense industry in New England. I have been doing writing for the Providence Journal. I had a series on electric boat and these big subsidy deals. There's a new one this week. I had done some other reporting for some other places too. And then in January, I decided to launch my own site for the reason that the places I was publishing with, they were more interested in just kind of the straight news, gather the information, report it to people type stuff. And I thought the type of story, type of topic that needed more perspective analysis, needed someone who could write about it in a way that could help readers see between the lines, and I wanted to offer more of that perspective to people and that analysis. And I wasn't going to be able to do it in that fashion or with enough regularity if I was just doing a freelance for the Journal or the NPR station. So I decided to launch my own site. So I've been doing that for about 5 or 6 months. And then within the last month, people kept on saying, the conversation's happening on Twitter, it's happening on Facebook, and I had started a social media account. So then I figured, all right, I'll get on there, and that's what I've been doing. It's kind of natural for me, so should have done it sooner.
So I want you to engage throughout this discussion in shameless self-promotion. Where can people find your blog site, and of course, what is your Twitter account?
Say that again? I'm having trouble hearing you a little. a little echoey.
Yeah, no, I want you to engage in shameless self-promotion tonight. So, where can folks find you on the web and on social media?
Oh, sure. So the website, my blog, it's just my last name and then weekly. So it's Nunes Weekly, Nunes Weekly.com. So I just call it that because I post an investigative piece every week. And then my Twitter is at Alex L. Nunes, Alex L. Nunes. So yeah, I put up a piece either like on a Tuesday or Thursday, sometimes on a Friday. If there's something that I found out that is timely and I can't wait, I might post 2 or 3 things a week. But generally speaking, it's once a week. And then I'll post on Twitter throughout the day.
All right, and that's how you and I ended up meeting, because your willingness to skewer all sides of the aisle, I find immensely attractive. You are by no means a creature of the left or right. You've got your own clear political philosophy, but at the same time, you're willing to call, you know what, where you see it, and there's certainly a shortage of that right now. But let's talk about electric boat for a while, because that's on the news cycle. But as we talk, hopefully in the future, you know, I look forward to your reflections on our current senators, our current congressmen, and as well as, you know, your vision of what's happening in Rhode Island government. Corporate cronyism is a huge issue on the coalition, and it's something that we seek to expose at every level. So, you were originally hired by the Journal on a freelance basis to do an analysis of electric boat. You became into it. What sets the stage? You know, if you will, what is the state of electric boat in Rhode Island today, and you know what's going on? What blew up in the news this week?
Okay, so you want me to give a big picture overview of kind of the context, and then bring people up to what happened this week?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So Electric Boat, you know, is a company that's been around for over 100 years. And, you know, they're a huge company in the 80s, 23,000 employees, something like that. They were building a lot of submarines for the U.S. Navy in the 1980s with the Reagan defense buildup. And a lot of people who have been in Rhode Island a while know that in the early 90s, after the fall of the Soviet Union, the defense budget and the budget around submarine building collapsed, and a lot of people were laid off. Right now, they're sort of in this, I guess you would say the good old days are coming back. They're getting all these contracts. They've been named the lead contractor on one specific fleet, and now they're revving up to hire all these people for it. They already are hiring all these people. The main contract is for what's called the Columbia class fleet, and that is that's going to be the next fleet that they're preparing to build. That would be the nuclear-armed submarines. So these are the ones that go around in the depths of the ocean, lurking, and the idea is that if anyone were to ever try to attack the U.S., these things could shoot up nuclear missiles at them. So this is something, a lot of people who follow my work are peace activists because they're concerned that, you know, we're going to be building these Armageddon machines and that taxpayer dollars be going to that. So they're opposed to it for that reason. Other people are also interested in my work because the federal contractor, these are federal dollars that are paying for all this. And then on top of that, this federal contractor has been trying to lean on both the states of Rhode Island and Connecticut to get them to pay for pretty much, you know, everything to get them ready for building these submarines. So they want Connecticut and Rhode Island to pay for infrastructure improvements to their shipyards so that they can do this. They want Connecticut and Rhode Island to pay to train their workforce so that they can do this. So basically, if you're going to look at it objectively, you know, you have a company, General Dynamics is worth something like their market capitalization is like $62 billion. So you have a company, you know, that's worth almost, you know, the GDP of Rhode Island, and they are squeezing Connecticut and Rhode Island, these two states that aren't, exactly fiscally sound right now, for what's essentially chump change to the company. And so when I was doing this reporting last year, Rhode Island had dedicated $4 million to training, a little more than $4 million at that point, and they had given Electric Boat numerous tax credits over the years, and it worked out to be between the grants and the tax credits, Rhode Island had supported Electric Boat in about $21 million. And then in Connecticut had supported Electric Boat in subsidies about $42 million. And then earlier this week, I think it was like Monday or Tuesday, Connecticut announces that they're going to give Electric Boat $83 million. And then on Thursday, Rhode Island announces that they're going to give Electric Boat $20 million. So it's just been this subsidy bonanza. And, like I think you were starting to get at, this is, I guess you could call it double dipping. The jobs are all paid for by federal taxes, and now all the investment that the company should be doing is not all of it, but certainly a significant portion is going to be paid for by these states. And then meanwhile, you have the question of, should we be building these things? Is this ethical? Is this moral? Is this what we want to do?
Right.
And then also, you have the question of, is this good economic development planning? Because if you look at it, this whole industry already went bust in the early 90s. Mm-hmm. Defense spending is known for being fickle like this, that it goes in cycles. People get a lot of support for a certain project 1 year. 5 years later, it's not there. Hundreds, thousands of people get laid off. So my personal interpretation, having watched this for a little while and very in-depth, is that I see a lot of opportunism going on here. I think that Governor Raimondo, Governor Malloy in Connecticut, they see an opportunity to look like they're the jobs governors, job creators.
Right.
I think that's particularly what goes on with Raimondo.
Right. Now,
because if you think about it, it's just not it's not a smart use of state taxpayer dollars. It just isn't.
We're investing.
It's going to a company that doesn't need it, and it's going to a sector of the economy that's kind of questionable in terms of investing in.
Right. I mean, it's a boom and bust mentality. Something I'd like to point out to the states of Washington and California a generation ago, based on their experience with companies like Lockheed and Boeing, moved away from, quite frankly, because you had these vicious cycles that were all based on exogenous events, no control, and/or political cycles. Crazy, really. And you and I had a couple of conversations in the run-up to today's show. You pointed out quite succinctly that economic development like this, and I use the coalition air quotes because it's not, is often based on the bogeyman created when the potential for the company leaving is introduced. And that's what you see with the pause signs right now. Every few months when people get wise to the latest scam, well, the company might leave, the pause signs might leave. Well, astonishingly enough, that was hinted at in this conversation. With the love of God, man, what's involved with a shipyard leaving? Can a shipyard leave? I mean, how does that work?
Mm-hmm. You're asking me?
Yeah, no, I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, my thoughts are, I mean, it's, I think it's ridiculous. I mean, they have the shipyard in Groton, Connecticut that's been there ages. They have this big one in Quonset. They've already put a lot of money into infrastructure at both of these places. Mm-hmm. They're readying. I mean, part of the reason they say they need money is that they're in this super big rush to get these people hired and trained so that they can start building this big contract. So the way they portray it is that they're under the gun to get this going now.
Always now.
So this is urgent. So if this is urgent and they need to hire thousands of people right now and get this infrastructure up to date right now, what company under those circumstances would all of a sudden just say, oh, I guess now because we're not getting 20 million from Rhode Island, we should just start, go looking at shipyards in South Carolina. I mean, it doesn't make any sense.
Right.
And then if you look at just defense, the defense economy in general, I mean, it's a totally, it's a part of the economy that's it's basically state run. You know, the Pentagon is their only, Pentagon is like Electric Boat's only business. So everything there is decided by lawmakers, Navy officials, people like that. So you think about it, in Rhode Island they have Jack Reed, who is the highest ranking Democrat on the Senate Armed Services Committee, Jim Landrigan, who's a senior member of the House Armed Services Committee, and then in Connecticut, the district where the Connecticut shipyard is, they have Joe Courtney, who's a long-time serving member of the House Armed Services Committee and the highest ranking Democrat on the House Armed Services Committee subcommittee that is in charge of all this sea warfare stuff. Mm-hmm. So I mean, just think about that for a second. You have all these power brokers in all these places that are tied directly to the two states that you're in, and you're just going to say, oh, screw it, we don't need those guys anymore. We're just going to move to South Carolina or North Carolina or wherever, right. Alienate Jack Reed, Jim Landrigan, and Joe Courtney, make them not want to do any of our bidding anymore in Congress. I mean, it just doesn't make any sense.
Right. Now, you do your homework. You took it one step further when you did some campaign finance analysis. What did you find in terms of the relationships between some of these power brokers and the fine folks at Electric Boat and General Dynamics?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I mean, if you're a local politician who has any type of influential position in Washington that could have some sort of effect on this, they're giving you money. Jack Reed's highest single donor is General Dynamics. Jim Landrigan's highest single donor is General Dynamics. Joe Courtney's highest single donor is General Dynamics. And then you get into the state level. I don't know where General Dynamics fits in terms of how General Dynamics would compare to other companies that give to Gina Raimondo. Mm-hmm. But I looked it up, and it was something like, I think it was like 13,000 total from employees of General Dynamics. And these are big donations from executives, like the president gave 3,000, the head of HR gave 1,000. And they all came right, after she became governor and then throughout her term. So, I mean, yeah, there's this greasing of the wheels with the donations. And then it's interesting if you look at all the donations of the guy like the president of Electric Boat, Jeff Geiger, he's giving to these local guys who are doing the bidding of the company. But then you'll also see that over the years they give to these random people, in some guy in Mississippi or Missouri. It's like, why are they giving that guy? That doesn't make any sense. And then you look and, they're the head of the Armed Services Committee. So they were a strategic give that year,
Right.
So, yeah.
I mean, and now, did Jim Langevin receive campaign contributions from any of these folks?
Oh, yeah. Jim Langevin's his top campaign contributor is General Dynamics. I think General Dynamics has given Jim Landrigan more than they've given Jack Reed, actually.
Wow.
I'd have to look at it, but I mean, they're both right around there.
Right.
I think total, Jim Landrigan gets Raytheon, Northrop Grumman. Just because I've researched this so in depth. If you watch like Jim Langevin give a talk at one of these like Southeastern New England Defense Industry Alliance, one of these trade groups, mm-hmm. He refers to the heads of these companies, people making millions of dollars a year. He refers to them as his good friends and stuff like that. And
right.
And they get up and they introduce Jim Langevin and talk about how great an advocate he is and how he's working hard for them. It's like a joke. And then meanwhile, if you're constituent, a real constituent, someone who's in his congressional district, you got to face them down at town halls or lunch with Langevins if you want to get your point across to them.
Right. And
bring up your issue.
And the kicker, I just want to reinforce, what makes this more egregious than, say, your typical Commerce Corporation, formerly known as Economic Development Corporation, scam deal. Think about, for example, the company that we just gave millions to, who Vistaprint, who are now competing with a local company. What makes this more egregious is that not only is General Dynamics making a fortune off the American taxpayer, that business is guaranteed. So there is no risk, there is no need, there is no economic incentive necessary to build it. We're not talking about a struggling startup here that needs a little juice. And as a libertarian, obviously I'm opposed to even that, but they're not looking for a quick loan so they can buy their office condo or build a little steel factory space so they can fabricate their product.
In most, I don't know the specifics of contracts that General Dynamics has going right now, but most of these big weapon system contracts are cost plus.
Right.
So the government funds them the cost of doing business basically, and then they get profit plus that. So it's a total scam. And like you said, where's the risk in it? So I interviewed Governor Rongo last year about this, and I said, do you think you're creating jobs, or do you think you're just training people who already have jobs? And she said, both. And it's sort of, it's basically, the way I see it, they put money into this. They put the state funds into supporting this because it's like, it'd be like in a baseball game where someone's just throwing you an underhand lob and you get to hit a home run, basically. Right. This is easy. This is easy to look like you're creating jobs. These are guaranteed jobs. So, you throw 20 million at them and then they hire 1,300 people, then you could say, oh, you look at this, it was all money well worth it, Right. When really they were going to come anyway. And it's interesting because I've studied this issue specifically, but then I've looked at economic development more broadly. And in some municipalities or some states, because they've tried to crack down on this type of abuse, they would make companies sign what's called a but-for clause. Mm-hmm. And what it means is that they would not have relocated or they would not have hired but for the incentive that they got. Right. Which you could say, like, how do you prove that? But at the same time, General Dynamics has never signed any but-for clause with the state of Rhode Island because, they wouldn't, because they're going to hire these people even if they don't get this this subsidy. Right.
So now what you've got the spectacle of this, and it happened this week right in front of your eyes. So if you were worried about Russiagate or if you're worried about all the other noise, this one might have slipped right by you, is government, politicians grandstanding for economic development that was going to occur anyway and is occurring on your dime 3 levels over. Because let's look at the Trail of Tears here. Number one, you've got built-in profits guaranteed to General Dynamics and Electric Boat. Number two, you've got all this money being spent on infrastructure and direct support for them. Number three, Quonset Point in and of itself is a government-created creature. This is even worse. I didn't think this was possible, but this is even worse than us building on the I-195 land, a building that's essentially tax exempt for Brown University, which is tax exempt, for research that's funded by us. So what I thought was impossible, that's why I claim this week we've reached peak stupid. Because I don't know of anything more egregious that I've seen in terms of economic development giveaways in my lifetime here in Rhode Island. This makes 38 studios tame by comparison. At least as doleful as the prospects were, there was the potential to create additional jobs here. Again, as a libertarian, I grotesquely disagree with anything that's going to interfere in free markets. But along the dogma of what constitutes quote-unquote economic development, that had at least some outside chance. This is just basically, we're stroking them a check for doing something they would have done anyway. Am I oversimplifying it? Alex, you're right there on the street. I'm not trying to make this seem easier than it is, but I think that's really at the heart of it, isn't it?
You're making the point that, I'm just reiterating because I'm having a little trouble hearing on my end. You're making the point that basically they're throwing money at something that's not really an investment because these jobs would be here anyway. Mm-hmm. So if you put it at basically anything else that might have a chance of springing up something where you're creating something where you might not have otherwise created it, that's right. A bad idea. Yeah, exactly. And yeah, I mean, I think there's a whole bunch of reasons why it's a bad idea. And if you look at, if you just look at the track record of what General Dynamics has been doing lately, it's just so obvious. They earlier, I reported this earlier in the year. They were doing this in Maine with a subsidiary they have up there that builds warships, and they were trying to get $60 million from the state of Maine. They only ended up getting $40 million. Then they did this with Connecticut starting at the beginning of the year, and now they're doing it with Rhode Island. Mm-hmm. And then at the meantime, their corporate tax rate for General Dynamics as a company, it just went down. Right. Because of the GOP tax bill. And I looked through the last earnings call, and I think they said their effective tax rate was like 28.6, and it was going to fall to 19% this year. So 28.6 to 19%. So they're going to, a windfall of money there too. So this idea that they're like hard up for cash is ridiculous. And I've done other stories on the amount of stock buybacks they do, like over 10 billion over a course of a few years. So they're just they're sitting on piles of cash. And if you look at because things are so tense and dangerous geopolitically now, defense companies are doing incredibly well because of that. It's sick to think of, but these companies are doing so well because people are so scared about the tensions in the world. So the idea that it's just, it's nuts. And I think, I think it also speaks to the lack of integrity and willingness to basically do anything to promote yourself as creating jobs for people, basically. Because, the thing is, these are, they're weapons of mass destruction. And you don't get any acknowledgement of that when you speak to Gina Raimondo or any of these people. When I went to, this is kind of rich. When I went to interview Gina Raimondo at her governor's office in the hallway, there's a bust of Martin Luther King. In the waiting room of her office, there was a book about ending gun violence. One of her staffers had a poster of Martin Luther King in their office. And then I'm going into her office to talk to her about nuclear weapons and how supportive she is of it. So, it's just sort of it's sort of silly. You see what I'm saying?
Oh, absolutely. The hypocrisy here is startling. On one hand, and this is what's scary about, and Alex, I know we talked a little bit about politics offline. I'm a libertarian, I'm a third-party guy. I have lots of friends who are progressive Democrats. I'm not scared of them like some of my Republican counterparts are. The scary part about I'll call it the new corporate Democrat, and that Gina embodies, is that they will stand there and convincingly ape and regurgitate the teachings of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King. They'll talk about peace in our time. They'll talk about a carbon-free environment. They'll give lip service to every single one of those issues in the most convincing manner imaginable. But at the same time, she takes campaign contributions from the chairman of the board of Wind Energy. She stands there with this ridiculous photo opportunity, only so willing to write a check, and continue to mortgage the future of Rhode Islanders for a defense company that, quite frankly, what's horrific about this to me, and what I enjoy about your analysis is you're willing to dive into the numbers and earnings reports effective tax rates, that's gold to me, because that's the real story. The amount of money relative to General Dynamics is de minimis. $20 million to them is not even a number on their annual reports effectively. $20 million to the state of Rhode Island, given its terrible infrastructure, crumbling schools, yada, 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 is an astonishing amount of money to give to someone who doesn't need it, gains us nothing in terms of the marketplace. It's the audacity is breathtaking. And I didn't think I was capable of finding more arrogance in an group of elected leaders than I'd found before. But, buddy, you dug it up, you topped that, man. Holy cow, as Phil Rizzuto would say. On every single level, this is flawed, it's hypocritical, it's everything wrong with American government right now.
Yeah, and I've done, the more people have followed my work recently, and I mentioned that like a lot of peace activists are interested in it. So I've been like an anti-war student group at Brown asked me to give a talk, and other anti-war groups have asked me to give a talk, so I put together a presentation. And one part that I put into it was about how the media has just completely gotten on board with this. Mm-hmm. And I think that's part of the reason why, you're sitting there saying like you're astonished that this is going on, and you're astonished that people aren't, putting two and two together like you are right now. And it's really because Gina Raimondo and Jack Reed and Jim Landry and Sheldon Whitehouse and the officials of Electric Boat, they cook up a press release that just says this is one big, giant, great jobs creation thing. And then they hold a press conference or they hold a ribbon cutting, and all the TV and all the print reporters and all the radio people they just file a story that says, this is great for jobs. This is great for jobs. This is what they said. And then you have people quoting them on figures and statistics that it's like, well, where are those statistics coming from? Just Gina Raimondo just threw it at you, so therefore it is true. Where did she get that number?
Right.
It's interesting. She's saying, I was reading a story that said that she's saying that these jobs that are going to be funded with this money are going to pay an average of $62,000 a year. She just said that yesterday at this event. But last year when I did the series for the Journal, I asked the Department of Labor Training to look at all the people who were trained with state funds, state money and federal money that Rhode Island had funneled to this. All the people who had been trained with it to that point, and tell me what the average starting salary was. And the average starting salary they gave me was $35,600. So I'm sort of like, when I see that she says that the average salary is going to be $62,000. Well, I guess that she's giving a different group maybe that they gave me last year, but it just seemed remarkable that she was making that bold a claim when I had heard something completely different last year, but in a figure that should be somewhat at least comparable. And then if you look up jobs at General Dynamics that are being offered now in Connecticut or Rhode Island, they're listing them at $14 an hour. So it's just sort of like starting at $14 an hour.
Right.
And then there's another one. This is another interesting one. This was a story I saw in the London paper from January. The head of HR at Electric Boat was touring a revitalized mill building in Norwich, Connecticut. Mm-hmm. And so it's an old building that had been updated, rehabbed with housing money from the state, and it was going to be for subsidized housing. And people who lived there would get their housing costs subsidized. And the reason why the state senator was taking Electric Boat folks around was that their idea was that they would offer this as a place where Electric Boat workers who were getting hired could live. And the article strictly states in it that people who would be getting these jobs, some of them would qualify for subsidized housing so they could move in there and have their rental costs subsidized. So you have all these like little pieces of evidence in all these different places saying that these actually aren't really great paying jobs. But because Gina Raimondo put out a press release that said these are great jobs, we're supporting families. There's some quote from Stephen Pryor in the Journal article that was like, these are good family, middle class family, raise a family, you know what I mean? And And it's like, well, what's really the story here? But I guess everyone just takes what they're saying at face value and just puts it up there on Projo's website or on WPRI or wherever.
Sweet Jesus.
I think there's no discussion, like I said too, about what the weapons are, and I think that's an important thing.
Well, no,
No matter what you think about what the Department of Defense should be doing, I think that people should be able to have a conversation about this, to say whether or not they agree with their government making these weapons, or whether or not they agree with their state putting more of their money to making these weapons.
Right. By the way, this is a governor who made a great show of walking the pension system away from gun manufacturers, and at the same time is taking literally the tax dollars of the state to, and I'm using the air quotes here, invest, as if we're going to get any return from it, invest in, well, really, really big gun manufacturers. And to your point too, I'm a libertarian, and one of the things that folks don't understand about libertarians is that we believe in a strong defense. As libertarians, we do not believe it's the role of the American government to be interfering in private states around the world. So despite the fact that you and I may have different quote-unquote party affiliations, I have a feeling that our sensibilities are much more closely aligned than you might believe. So talk about, if you will, the ethics of a state government subsidizing, well, and let's be blunt, the governor of the state of Rhode Island is on a jihad against individual gun rights and against what she calls weapons of war. Yet what are we producing here at Electric Boat?
Yeah, I mean, so right now, so I'll say right now, I mean, this Columbia class, right now it's under development. It's being developed by Electric Boat. It's going to be built between, I think, the Navy's going to procure it between 2021 and 2035. So these are going to be built in the next couple of years. And so basically, I mean, these are weapon systems that could, end civilization, basically. Mm-hmm. They're, the ones that are going around right now, the ones that are currently in service are called the Ohio class, and they were built at Electric Boat in the 80s and the 90s. Right. And they carry Trident nuclear missiles. I mean, this fleet of submarines could end civilization as we know it, if a button was pushed. Mm-hmm. So now, I mean, a lot of people have the thought of, hey, we're in this, we're at this point where now the Navy says that we need a new fleet. The old fleet's gotten too old, we need a new fleet. Well, shouldn't we talk about, possibility of maybe this is the time, now that these other ones are coming out of service, to think about, rethinking our policy here? America is like, the leader of the world. We're supposed to be projecting leadership. Maybe we can send a signal to everyone else that nuclear weapons aren't here to stay forever, that maybe we want to reduce them, and maybe they should reduce them. I think 9 countries have nuclear weapons right now, Right. So it's a much more dangerous environment than it was during the height of the Cold War. Mm-hmm. So yeah. But, I mean, you never hear anyone talk about this. Jack Reed won't talk about it. He'll just say they're strategically necessary. Sheldon Whitehouse will say the same thing. Gina Raimondo will just stick her head in the sand about any of this type of stuff. Mm-hmm. And it was interesting. I asked her this question, and she went into this anecdote about a professor or a teacher from her high school or something who's a peace activist, and he asked her about, why do you have to put money into defense jobs? And then she said, it's a good question, but we do need to defend our country. And it was just like the stupidest, I thought it was the stupidest just talking point, it was just like a soundbite buzzword kind of clip, And it was like, well, if you break that down logically, okay, we still need to defend ourselves. Well, let's look at that, $700 billion Pentagon budget this year. That's more than like the next 7 or 8 countries combined. Okay, we need to defend ourselves, but do we need $700 billion? Do we need to be building a fleet of nuclear armed submarines that costs $100 billion? Is that what that equates to? Defending ourselves means a $104 billion fleet of submarines? It's interesting because I through my reporting, I interviewed people who are like analysts at the U.S. Naval Institute, and these people were critical of the idea of building these ships, which people at the U.S. Naval Institute aren't exactly, dubs. Yeah.
Well, remember also, this was the same congressional delegation that voted against Bernie Sanders' simple resolution to oppose or to rein in or require, I forget the exact wording, require discussion of an act of war against Yemen. So these are not people who are at all interested in discussing peace or interested in having at least a conversation, as you point out, about the implications of these decisions. These people are warhawks. Their campaigns benefit from it on a personal level, and they continue to push our nation forward despite putting the mantle of peace and wearing the mantle of peace on their shoulders. So wow, stunning. And again, my hat's off to you because in one conversation, you've covered on one respective issue, defense analysts, effective tax rates, earnings reports, philosophy, as well as some just good old-fashioned shoe leather about campaign finance reporting. And this is, of course, the value of the independent media here in the state of Rhode Island, because, quite frankly, the conventional media doesn't have the attention span, I believe, to support this type of work. It just doesn't. They should. They have the opportunity, they have the financing, they have the platform, but for whatever reason, they refuse to. It's sad.
Yeah, I mean, I think in terms of people who do this type of work, like me, it's like you got to do it because you see some other, higher purpose in doing it.
Right. No, exactly. Well, Alex, I got to bring tonight's show to a close. I'm hoping that you'll join us as often as you see fit. The door is always open. Again, let's talk about where folks can find you. Our job here at the Coalition is to promote people like yours, not try to, ride their coattails. So, folks, if you're looking to read some really good stuff, because as Faber College would tell you, knowledge is good. What is it? It's the newsreport.org?
Yep. So my website is newsweekly.com, N-U-N-E-S weekly.com, and I'm planning on putting up a post next week about the what I think is the totally undemocratic process in which these subsidies were announced. Mm-hmm. In Maine, when they did their subsidy, they did it through the General Assembly. It went through, the Senate there and the House of Representatives. They held hearings. Activists got to speak out against it, all that. In Rhode Island, we just have it sprung on us, In Connecticut, they just had it sprung on them. Started off as a bill in Connecticut, and then it was just sprung on them. So I'm going to write something about how undemocratic this was, how Rhode Islanders weren't allowed to be a part of the process. We just have these things announced as if they're good for us. Right. So that's going to be next week on my website, newsweekly.com. And then my Twitter account is at Alex L. Nunes. Mm-hmm. And again, my name's spelled N-U-N-E-S.
Great. Well, folks, whether you're listening tonight...
And also, if anyone wants... I have this presentation that I put together that a few anti-war places have wanted me to give, and if anyone wants a copy of it, wants me to give the talk or whatever, they can contact me through Twitter or on my website.
Well, we'd love to put it up on our website as well, so maybe that's something we can work out. You can share or present on the air at some point and in some format. That's something we'd love to see.
Okay.
All right, well, folks, again, Alex Nunes, Alex L. Nunes, at Alex L. Nunes on the Mighty Mighty Twitter. He's often funny, but with a very sharp point attached to it, pointing out a lot of the irony, a lot of the hypocrisy. But as we pointed out in depth tonight, there's a whole hell of a lot of fact work and research that's gone underneath this. This simply isn't an individual complaining or whining. This is an individual who's taking the time in a very clear, accessible format to both substantiate and point out compelling issues for Rhode Islanders. Alex, thank you so very much for joining us tonight.
All right, yep. Thanks for having me, Pat.
All right,
take care.
We'll talk
Have a
to you
good
next
weekend.
week. Thanks, buddy.
Bye.
Well, again, as always, we've got a few minutes over. I'm gonna do my best to get this out to you as quickly as possible. Don't even know where to begin to say. These are folks who clearly take it personally. Whether it be a discussion of the Hubble Report, I think one of the more compelling half hours or so that I've had in this show, and it was just a few minutes ago with Mr. Nunes, I hope we get him on the show. We've covered everything tonight. Despicable taxes, clear analysis of one of the great tragedies in recent American history, as well as the history of a once proud, now resurgent political party. Great stuff. Folks, we are the Coalition, loud and proud, outrage, poor and free, civilly disobedient media, broadcasting live on the Worldwide Coalition Network here at the Go Local Live Broadcast Center, 90 Way Boston Street, in the heart of the city we love, Providence, Rhode Island. If you're anywhere near Providence tonight, come on down, enjoy the nightlife, the restaurants, the bars, the scene. Facebook.com/The Coalition Radio, on the mighty Twitter at Coalition_radio, and on the all apolitical Billionaire Baseball Boys Club feed at Pawtucket is Home. And of course, this show and other shows will live in perpetuity on our YouTube page, which is connected right on the top mast at coalitionradio.us. To all the people who contribute tonight, I thank you. To my sponsors, a big thanks. Beacon Shipping and Logistics, 1-855-3-SHIP-IT. airsciences.net, home remediation for biohazards, both in the home, in the school, and the workplace. And of course, we spent a lot of time tonight discussing, I believe, one of Rhode Island's great companies, Yacht Club Soda. Folks, the holidays are coming up, the summer is coming up. There's nothing more refreshing than a naturally flavored ginger ale, ice cold birch beer, in the glass bottle, from the aquifer, from Yacht Club Soda. Folks, as always, please take it very personally. We'll see you next week. We'll see you next week. We'll see you next week. We'll see you next week.